Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Now I've actually done another Isaacson biography before, Elon Musk's. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card in case you're interested. And I'm going to go in a different direction today than I did on that one, in which I talked about Musk's different companies and some of the impressions I got from Isaacson's work. I'm actually going to jump right to the conclusion. I'm going to give you some of Isaacson's concluding ideas in the book, and then he hands it over to Jobs to have the last word. And so I'm going to read both of those excerpts for you, and then you can use that to decide whether you'd maybe like to read this book. Jobs' intensity was also evident in his ability to focus. He would set priorities, aim his laser attention on them, and filter out distractions. If something engaged him, the user interface for the original Macintosh, the design of the iPod and iPhone, getting music companies into the iTunes store, he was relentless. But if he did not want to deal with something, a legal annoyance, a business issue, his cancer diagnosis, a family tug, he would resolutely ignore it. That focus allowed him to say no. He got Apple back on track by cutting all except a few core products. He made devices simpler by eliminating buttons, software simpler by eliminating features, and interfaces simpler by eliminating options. He attributed his ability to focus and his love of simplicity to his Zen training. It honed his appreciation for intuition, showed him how to filter out anything that was distracting or unnecessary, and nurtured in him an aesthetic based on minimalism. Unfortunately, his Zen training never quite produced in him a Zen-like calm or inner serenity, and that too is part of his legacy. He was often tightly coiled and impatient, traits he made no effort to hide. Most people have a regulator between their mind and mouth that modulates their brutish sentiments and spikiest impulses. Not Jobs. He made a point of being brutally honest. My job is to say when something sucks rather than sugarcoat it, he said. This made him charismatic and inspiring, yet also, to use the technical term, an a-hole at times. Andy Hertzfeld once told me, the one question I truly love Steve to answer is, why are you sometimes so mean? Even his family members wondered whether he simply lacked the filter that restrains people from venting their wounding thoughts or willfully bypassed it. Job claims it was the former. This is who I am, and you can't expect me to be someone I'm not, he replied when I asked him the question. But I think he actually could have controlled himself if he had wanted. When he hurt people, it was not because he was lacking in emotional awareness. Quite the contrary. He could size people up, understand their inner thoughts, and know how to relate to them, cajole them, or hurt them at will. The nasty edge to his personality was not necessary. It hindered him more than it helped him, but it did, at times, serve a purpose. Polite and velvety leaders who take care to avoid bruising others are generally not as effective at forcing change. Dozens of the colleagues whom Jobs most abused ended their litany of horror stories by saying that he got them to do things they never dreamed possible, and he created a corporation crammed with A players. The saga of Steve Jobs is the Silicon Valley creation myth writ large, launching a startup in his parents' garage and building it into the world's most valuable company. He didn't invent many things outright, but he was a master at putting together ideas, art, and technology in ways that invented the future. He designed the Mac after appreciating the power of graphical interfaces in a way that Xerox was unable to do. And he created the iPod after grasping the joy of having 1,000 songs in your pocket in a way that Sony, which had all the assets and heritage, never could accomplish. Some leaders push innovations by being good at the big picture. Others do so by mastering details. Jobs did both relentlessly. As a result, he launched a series of products over 3 decades that transformed whole industries. The Apple II, which took Wozniak's circuit board and turned it into the first personal computer that was not just for hobbyists. The Macintosh, which begat the home computer revolution and popularized graphic user interfaces. Toy Story and other Pixar blockbusters, which opened up the miracle of digital imagination. Apple Stores, which reinvented the role of a store in defining a brand. The iPod, which changed the way we consume music. The iTunes Store, which saved the music industry. The iPhone, which turned mobile phones into music, photography, video, email, and web devices. The App Store, which spawned a new content creation industry. The iPad, which launched tablet computing and offered a platform for digital newspapers, magazines, books, and videos. iCloud, which demoted the computer from its central role in managing our content and let all of our devices sync seamlessly. And Apple itself, which Jobs considered his greatest creation, a place where imagination was nurtured, applied, and executed in ways so creative that it became the most valuable company on earth. Was he smart? No, not exceptionally. Instead, he was a genius. His imaginative leaps were instinctive, unexpected, and at times magical. He was indeed an example of what the mathematician Mark Kac called a magician genius, someone whose insights come out of the blue and require intuition more than mere mental processing power. Like a pathfinder, he could absorb information, sniff the winds, and sense what lay ahead. Steve Jobs thus became the greatest business executive of our era, the one most certain to be remembered a century from now. History will place him in the pantheon right next to Edison and Ford. More than anyone else of his time, he made products that were completely innovative, combining the power of poetry and processors. With a ferocity that could make working with him as unsettling as it was inspiring, he also built the world's most creative company, and he was able to infuse into its DNA the design sensibilities, perfectionism, and imagination that make it likely to be, even decades from now, the company that thrives best at the intersection of artistry and technology. If you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting like or subscribe. It's a way to get this out to more people. And one more thing, Isaacson says, biographers are supposed to have the last word, but this is a biography of Steve Jobs. Even though he did not impose his legendary desire for control on this project, I suspect that I would not be conveying the right feel for him, the way he asserted himself in any situation, if I just shuffled him onto history's stage without letting him have some last words. Over the course of our conversations, there were many times when he reflected on what he hoped his legacy would be. Here are those thoughts in his own words. My passion has been to build an enduring company where people were motivated to make great products. Everything else was secondary. Sure, it was great to make a profit because that was what allowed you to make great products. But the products, not the profits, were the motivation. Scully flipped those priorities to where the goal was to make money. It's a subtle difference, but it ends up meaning everything. The people you hire, who gets promoted, what you discuss in meetings. Some people say, give the customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do. I think Henry Ford once said, if I asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. Edwin Land of Polaroid talked about the intersection of the humanities and science. I like that intersection. There's something magical about that place. There are a lot of people innovating, and that's not the main distinction of my career. The reason Apple resonates with people is that there's a deep current of humanity in our innovation. I think great artists and great engineers are similar in that they both have a desire to express themselves. In fact, some of the best people working on the original Mac were poets and musicians on the side. In the 70s, computers became a way for people to express their creativity. Great artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo were also great at science. Michelangelo knew a lot about how to quarry stone, not just how to be a sculptor. People pay us to integrate things for them because they don't have the time to think about this stuff 24/7. If you have an extreme passion for producing great products, it pushes you to be integrated, to connect your hardware and your software and content management. You want to break new ground, so you have to do it yourself. If you want to allow your products to be open to other hardware or software, you have to give up some of your vision. At different times in the past, there were companies that exemplified Silicon Valley. It was Hewlett-Packard for a long time. Then in the semiconductor era, it was Fairchild and Intel. I think that it was Apple for a while, and then that faded. And then today, I think it's Apple and Google, and a little more so Apple. I think Apple has stood the test of time. It's been around for a while, but it's still at the cutting edge of what's going on. It's easy to throw stones at Microsoft. They've clearly fallen from their dominance. They become mostly irrelevant, and yet I appreciate what they did and how hard it was. They were very good at the business side of things. They were never as ambitious product-wise as they should have been. Bill likes to portray himself as a man of the product, but he's really not. He's a business person. Winning business was more important than making great products. He ended up the wealthiest guy around, and if that was his goal, then he achieved it. But it's never been my goal, and I wonder in the end if it was his goal. I admire him for the company he built. It's impressive. And I enjoyed working with him. He's bright and actually has a good sense of humor. But Microsoft never had the humanities and liberal arts in its DNA. Even when they saw the Mac, they couldn't copy it well. They totally didn't get it. For my own thoughts on Bill Gates, I reviewed a documentary about him. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card. I have my own theory about why decline happens at companies like IBM or Microsoft. The company does a great job, innovates, and becomes a monopoly or close to it in some field. And then the quality of the product becomes less important. The company starts valuing the great salesmen because they're the ones who can move the needle on revenues, not the product engineers and designers. So the salespeople end up running the company. John Akers at IBM was a smart, eloquent, fantastic salesperson, but he didn't know anything about product. The same thing happened at Xerox. When the sales guys run the company, the product guys don't matter so much, and a lot of them just turn off. It happened at Apple when Scully came in, which was my fault, and it happened when Ballmer took over at Microsoft. Apple was lucky and it rebounded, but I don't think anything will change at Microsoft as long as Ballmer is running it. I hate it when people call themselves entrepreneurs when what they're really trying to do is launch a startup and then sell or go public so they can cash in and move on. They're unwilling to do the work it takes to build a real company, which is the hardest work in business. That's how you really make a contribution and add to the legacy of those who went before. You build a company that will stand for something a generation or two from now. That's what Walt Disney did, and Hewlett and Packard, and the people who built Intel. They created a company to last, not just to make money. That's what I want Apple to be. I don't think I run roughshod over people, but if something stinks, I tell people to their face. It's my job to be honest. I know what I'm talking about, and I usually turn out to be right. That's the culture I try to create. We are brutally honest with each other, and anyone can tell me they think I am full of crap, and I can tell them the same. And we've had some rip-roaring arguments where we are yelling at each other, and it's some of the best times I've ever had. I feel totally comfortable saying, Ron, that store looks like crap in front of everyone else. Or I might say, we really screwed up the engineering on this in front of the person that's responsible. That's the ante for being in the room. You've got to be able to be super honest. Maybe there's a better way, a gentleman's club where we all wear ties and speak in this Brahmin language and velvet code words. But I don't know that way because I'm middle class from California. I was hard on people sometimes, perhaps harder than I needed to be. I remember the time when Reed was 6 years old, coming home, and I had just fired somebody that day. And I imagined what it was like for that person to tell his family and his young son that he had lost his job. It was hard, but somebody's got to do it. I figured that it was always my job to make sure that the team was excellent, and if I didn't do it, nobody was going to do it. You always have to keep pushing to innovate. Dylan could have sung protest songs forever and probably made a lot of money, but he didn't. He had to move on, and when he did, by going electric in 1965, he alienated a lot of people. His 1966 Europe tour was his greatest. He would come on and do a set of acoustic guitar, and the audiences loved him. Then he brought out what became the band, and they would all do an electric set, and the audience sometimes booed. There was one point where he was about to sing Like a Rolling Stone, and someone from the audience yells, Judas, and Dylan then says, play it loud, and they did. The Beatles were the same way. They kept evolving, moving, refining their art. That's what I've always tried to do, keep moving. Otherwise, as Dylan says, if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. What drove me? I think most creative people want to express appreciation for being able to take advantage of the work that's been done by others before us. I didn't invent the language or mathematics I use. I make little of my own food, none of my own clothes. Everything I do depends on other members of our species and the shoulders that we stand on. And a lot of us want to contribute something back to our species and to add something to the flow. It's about trying to express something in the only way that most of us know how, because we can't write Bob Dylan songs or Tom Stoppard plays. We try to use the talents we do have to express our deep feelings, to show our appreciation of all the contributions that came before us, and to add something to that flow. That's what has driven me. So, some words from Steve Jobs himself as Walter Isaacson lets him close out the biography. What else would I add to that? I've said before, the film, which stars Michael Fassbender, which uses this biography as part of its source material, I think does an excellent job of portraying Jobs as he was, someone who was intensely driven about something of this world. And as a result, he neglected his family and some of the people that were close to him. And as Isaacson notes, everybody who will then tell you, here's the bad things that Steve Jobs did to me, they'll end by saying, and he made me do things that I never thought I could do or probably never have since. And there's a price to that. And some might say it's worth it. Others may say it's not. But I think, obviously, for me, for the focus of this channel and in continuity of my thought over all the years that we've been reviewing books, the question obviously has to be on the life to come. And whatever effort you put into this life is passing. And if you put in if Jobs put in a fraction of the effort that he had put into this life, into the next life, he would have been a saint. He would have been one of the greatest saints in history. But that's alternate history. That's another time. But I think it's a good reminder to us what you're able to accomplish when you put your mind to it, just in the natural order. That's just as possible in the supernatural order. It's just a different set of priorities, and you would say a different level of difficulty. Yes, the natural order is difficult, but the supernatural order is even more difficult. But grace builds on nature, and as you chase excellence in the natural order, it's only going to make it easier for you to chase and achieve excellence in the supernatural order. Something to think about. If you'd like to get a copy of the book, read it for yourself. You can see it's a typical Isaacson biography. It's not short, but I think it's worth reading. You can buy a book. You can buy a copy in the description. There's a link. It's one of the ways that you can support this channel. You can also like, subscribe, hype, do all the things that will help this review get out to other people. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, there's links to PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. If you'd like to get early access to videos like this one, as well as a once-a-month exclusive video where I share what I'm thinking about, working on, talking about behind the scenes, there's links to Patreon and YouTube membership. They're different platforms, but they get you the same benefits. There's also a link to my Amazon wish list. If you'd like to pick out a book for the future for me to review, there's lots of different books there. You'll see some books on Palestine. Obviously, that's for my Palestine bookshelf project if you want to go check that out. But books that are not on Palestine are for this channel. Buy one, send it my way, and I'll do my best to review it in a timely manner. Until next time, enjoy your reading.